more for Kaikoura, and the business support packages have been extended as well.
Great.
Outrage as netball umpire punishes overweight player in Brisbane. Rachel Brown cried for the entire second quarter after an umpire ruled her body shape meant her dress was too short and deducted her team 2 points as a result. And now the Brisbane Netball Association says online, "Hi Rachel, we're very sorry this situation's occurred and made you feel that way. It's not the intention of our policy to make people feel badly about themselves. The purpose is to protect and prevent adolescent girls from wearing inappropriate uniforms."
Patently clear she wasn't an adolescent.
No.
Exactly.
Is this the sort of issue, Fiona, if it really is an issue, that should be sorted out among players themselves with a quiet word? What do you think about this?
This whole story made me incandescent with rage. I could not believe that statement, that baffling statement about the purpose being to protect and prevent adolescent girls from wearing inappropriate uniforms. Okay, so there's a few things here. First of all, yes, as you point out, Peter, she's clearly not an adolescent. She's 30 years old. She's doing her best with an impractical uniform for a 30-year-old. But also, yes, it should have been sorted out offline, so to speak, but also I don't understand that wording. I mean, protecting adolescent girls from what? That just sounds like victim blaming to me, and it concerns me that because these girls are wearing short skirts and are adolescents and are playing netball, what are we saying about that with that statement, that we're protecting these adolescent girls? There were so many things fundamentally wrong with that statement. It sort of reeks of victim blaming. Short skirts don't rape, rapists rape, let's not forget that. But also, yes, she was 30, she was doing her best and preventing adolescent girls from wearing the uniform incorrectly. I can understand if there's some kind of uniform regulation that needs to be followed, but for a 30-year-old playing netball and doing her best with a uniform which is not practical for the sport it's for, ridiculous.
Yeah, there is a question that she said in that story. I couldn't quite make head nor tail of it, but it did say that she asked them why her dress was too short, and she offered that maybe it was because of my size, and they agreed, and then she got angry, which seemed a little weird.
The whole story is strange.
Yeah.
We don't do any of this in the real world outside netball. I mean, we don't go up to men or women or girls and say, hey, we don't think you should be wearing that. You're carrying too much weight.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mark Greatbatch. You can no longer play cricket. You're too fat already. I mean, you're a disgrace to the uniform. It's nonsense.
Why not just get a uniform that serves the purpose? I mean, they're playing sport. They're not sort of, I don't know,
well, here's a woman who does have a weight problem who's working on getting rid of it.
Well, exactly.
At least doing her best, Oh, Lord,
But the short skirts, I mean, haven't they had their day anyway, really? That's my point.
Maybe. I don't, what else do you wear? Oh, you wear
shorts.
Shorts, right, yeah, that makes sense.
Why can't they wear shorts?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, they're absolutely right.
Many people here, by the way, will be thinking of former Silver Fern Tanya Dalton today, fighting for her life, of course, after collapsing with that brain aneurysm during a game of touch, and the condition described as critical, and her family is with her, and our thoughts are with her and them too, indeed. I am sure. Thanks for your company, everybody. The big Academy Awards still to come, and Checkpoint will have those. Peter Elliott, thank you for being on the panel today.
Nice to be here.
Fiona Fraser, nice to have you back too, Fiona.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to us, and we are back tomorrow, and we will see you then.
Kia ora everyone, lots unfolding as we go to air. A New Zealander, John Gilbert, has just won an Academy Award, Best Editing for Hacksaw Ridge. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says employers tell him every week they can't find workers who pass drug tests. What's his evidence for that? We're going to try and drill into this. 2 people are dead, of course, and 5 injured after that horror crash near Nelson. We go there live. We talk to the youngest female ever to swim Cook Strait. She's 12 years old. Starship Hospital's child safety team says the government's not doing enough to get the message out about car seats. And a home for sale to first home buyers only. Do join us after Anna with the news at 5.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. The Prime Minister says the government is still hearing from employers around the country that they're struggling to find enough New Zealanders to fill job shortages. And in many cases, it's because the applicant would fail the required drug test. Last year, John Key said he continually heard from employers frustrated with New Zealanders' work ethic and drug problems. Bill English says he's hearing the same thing.
One of the hurdles these days is just passing the drug test. Under workplace safety, you can't have people on your premises that are under the influence of drugs, and a lot of our younger people can't pass that test.
And Bill English wouldn't put a figure on exactly how many employers have raised this, but says he hears about it 2 or 3 times a week. The government has extended for a second time its support package for businesses hit by the quake, although this time those based in the Wellington or Hutt areas will no longer be eligible. The original 8-week wage subsidy package announced after the quake was set to run out in early March, after being extended by 8 weeks. Under the new extension, for the first 4 weeks, businesses will get $375 a week for each full-time employee and $225 for each part-time worker. Those payments will then drop to $250 and $150 respectively for the following 4 weeks. A Northland dairy owner bashed on the head with a tyre iron says the home detention sentence given to his attacker is laughable. Hemant Lal says the hold-up in his Hikurangi store last July left him with severe headaches for 3 months and temporarily paralysed him on one side. He says he could have died, yet the robber is sitting at home for 9 months on a benefit.
It's a joke. It's not enough because they know they're going to get away with it. That's why they have done it. I want to know the public view. What does public say? They will be coming all sorts of answers, but all sorts of question as well. But is it enough? Doing something like that, hurting people who is working.
Hemant Lal says in the 13 years he's owned the dairy, he's been robbed 9 times, including once at knife point and once at gunpoint. The Law Society is backing calls for an independent authority to be set up as a watchdog investigating complaints and failures by child, youth and family. The agency has admitted it failed by sending a toddler back into a pea-using household where he died. The Society's Chair of Family Law, Michelle Duggan, says the idea for an independent authority came up during parliamentary consideration of the bill deciding how Oranga Tamariki, the Ministry for Vulnerable Children, will operate. She says recommendations called for such an authority within the new ministry.
The New Zealand Law Society and its submissions on the bill have said, the best sort of complaint service is one that's independent. Look, Children's Commission seems to be the perfect fit.
And Michelle Duggan of the Law Society. A New Zealand film editor has won an Oscar for Best Editing on the war film Hacksaw Ridge. It's John Gilbert's first Academy Award and his second nomination, having worked with Peter Jackson on the first Lord of the Rings film. The editor, who lives in Wellington, also won a BAFTA earlier this month. The mother of a New Zealand woman murdered on the Gold Coast has described her killer as a narcissistic monster. In the Supreme Court in Melbourne today, former Auckland man Lionel Patia pleaded guilty to murdering his former partner Tara Brown. Patia chased the 24-year-old at high speed and ran her off the road after she dropped their daughter off at daycare. He then bashed her with a fire hydrant cover while she was trapped in the wreckage of the vehicle. Ms Brown had reportedly contacted the police about domestic violence issues in the week before her death. In a victim impact statement, her mother, Natalie Hinton, said domestic abuse has become a national tragedy. 2 people have been killed in a 3-vehicle crash in the Tasman district and 4 others were seriously injured. It happened on State Highway 60 between Richmond and Mapua this morning. The police and other emergency services are still at the scene and the road will remain closed for several hours. The police have named the 44-year-old man shot dead by a police officer north of Wellington yesterday. Christopher Wayne Brown, who lives in Porirua, was shot near the Mana Esplanade and died on the way to hospital. Several investigations are being carried out, including one by the Independent Police Conduct Authority. And it's 4 minutes past 5. To sport now, our New Zealand cyclists Raquel Sheath and Michaela Drummond have won silver in the Women's Madison at the Track World Cup in Los Angeles. Fellow New Zealand cyclist Jamie Nielsen's earlier won bronze in the women's individual pursuit. England coach Eddie Jones has attacked Italy's tactics during their Six Nations match this morning, comparing them to the Trevor Chappell underarm delivery in cricket. Italy failed to put players into a ruck, allowing them to legally drift behind the tackle area and obstruct the England backline. Despite winning the game 36-15, Jones wasn't happy, saying French referee Romain Opuit had a shocker.
Yeah, he wasn't refereeing rugby. We've got to come up for a new name for it. No ruck rugby or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure Trevor Chappell would have been proud today.
Do you think this might usher in a law change?
Well, I don't think anyone wants to see a game like that, do they? No one likes to see rugby not played in its proper form, so I think the World Rugby got to have a very close look at it.
Eddie Jones and England remain unbeaten at the top of the Six Nations standings and have closed to within one game of the All Blacks' unbeaten Test run of 18. American golfer Ricky Fowler won his fourth PGA Tour title with a 4-stroke victory at the Honda Classic in Florida. And New Zealand golfer Danny Lee missed another cut and thus fought outside the world's top 100 for the first time in 2 years. And that's the news.
Ignoring a family.
If SIFS had given us the decency of advising us that our nephew had been harmed before he was placed back in the home, our family certainly would have worked with the agency.
Ignoring Trump.
People used to say we should ignore him. So just ignore Mulder and you go away. And people are saying just ignore Trump, but you can't.
Ignoring ambition.
It has not been on our agenda and it is a beltway issue. Most people out there aren't interested in my relative position in the Labour caucus.
Never ignored. Morning Report with Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, an in-depth study of Airbnb, including whether it has worsened the affordable housing crisis. And after 10, who better to discuss the funny things our brains do than a neuroscientist and comedian, Dean Burnett, on The Idiot Brain. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service. Auckland, Northland and the Coromandel Peninsula, fine spells and isolated showers. Waikato to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country, mainly fine, but scattered showers during the afternoons and evenings. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly cloudy. A few showers, mainly about the ranges, some heavy during the afternoons and evenings with possible thunderstorms. Manawatu to Wellington and Wairarapa, also Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, fine weather. Westland, Fiordland, Southland, Otago and Canterbury mostly fine. Areas of clouds or fog morning and evening. Cloud more persistent about coastal Southland. And for the Chatham Islands, fine today and becoming cloudy overnight. And you are with John Campbell and Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Anna Thomas. Nice to have you here. It is 8 minutes past 5. Thank you, everyone, for your company. Let's begin tonight with New Zealand film editor John Gilbert, who has just taken out an Oscar, winning the Best Editing Award for his work on the war film Hacksaw Ridge. It's his first Academy Award, his second nomination. He was nominated for the first Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Ring. He lives in Wellington. It's interesting to see the Aussies are now claiming him as theirs, but that's pretty pro forma stuff in the circumstances. He won a BAFTA earlier this month. Here's how the Oscar unfolded a very short time ago.
And the Oscar goes to
Hacksaw Ridge, John Gilbert.
This is the first Oscar and second nomination for John Gilbert. He received his first nomination in this category for The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, it's yours. I'll hold on to it.
Wow, unbelievable. An editor needs good material, and the story of Desmond Doss and his courage and selflessness was as good as you get. So that was a great start for me. I want to thank my team in Australia, Carly Turner, Kathy Freeman, I hope you're watching, Bill Mechanic for supporting me and introducing me to Mel. Mel, I had a fabulous time working on this film with you, and you're a great director, and I hope there's plenty more where this came from. My wife Karen over there, I couldn't do this without you, my love. Up there's my Max and Lily. Where are you? Yeah, and Lucia and Amelia back in New Zealand. I hope you're watching. Thank you very much. I appreciate this so much.
John Gilbert sounding genuinely stoked as you would be, having just won a short time ago Best Editor for his work on Hackshaw Ridge. The rest of the Oscars, well, politics of course, diversity. On display, 2 black actors have taken out key awards, while host and comedian Jimmy Kimmel took a few digs at the president and the political divisions in the US.
I'm not the man to unite this country, but it can be done. If every person watching this show, I don't want to get too serious, but there are millions and millions of people watching right now, and if every one of you took a minute to reach out to one person you disagree with, someone you like, and have a positive, considerate conversation, not as liberals or conservatives, as Americans, if we would all do that, we could make America great again. We really could. It starts with us.
Jimmy Kimmel had a bit of a go at the Academy's record on diversity in his opening monologue, a well-received opening monologue, but after the Oscars So White movement, the Academy may have sat up and listened. Viola Davis won her first Oscar for her supporting role as a long-suffering housewife in the African-American family drama Fences.
People ask me all the time, what kind of stories do you want to tell, Viola? And I say, exhume those bodies. Exhume those stories. The stories of the people who dreamed big and never saw those dreams to fruition. People who fell in love and lost. I became an artist, and thank God I did, because we are the only profession that celebrates what it means to live a life.
It's the first time in 3 years that a black actor has taken out an Oscar in any of the categories. In fact, they've been conspicuous by their absence in the past couple of years. Mahershala Ali won Best Supporting Actor for his role in the independent drama Moonlight, portraying a drug-dealing mentor to an impoverished black boy, and accepting his award, the 43-year-old thanked his teachers.
I had so many wonderful teachers, and one thing that they consistently told me is that it wasn't about you. It's not about you. It's about these characters. You're in service to these stories and these characters.
Mahershala Ali, who won Best Supporting Actor in the Barry Jenkins film Moonlight, that is still up for Best Director and Best Film, along with La La Land. Of course, we will have more as the Academy Awards proceed. In terms of sending a political message, it was the winner of the Best Foreign Film that was the most pointed. The Iranian film, The Salesman, took out the award, but its director, Asghar Farhadi, was not present to receive it. He accepted the award in a statement which was read out.
I'm sorry I'm not with you tonight. My absence is out of respect for the people of my country and those of other 6 nations whom have been disrespected by the inhumane law that bans entry of immigrants to the U.S.
A statement being read out on behalf of the director of The Salesman. La La Land, which has been nominated for 14 awards, is not really fired yet. So far it's only won the award for Best Cinematography, but some of the main categories are still to come. We'll keep you updated throughout the show. And of course, we've spoken to April Rain often on this program, the woman behind Oscars So White. She is working furiously tonight, but we're going to try and get hold of her before 6:30 to discuss what has happened after and perhaps even as a result of her campaign. It's 40 minutes past 5. Thank you for joining us. You're with Checkpoint. 2 people have died and several have been injured after a crash on Tasman's coastal highway. Emergency services remain at the scene of the crash on State Highway 60 in Redwood Valley. It is a terrible scene. Our reporter Tracy Neal is live from there. Hi Tracy, what can you tell us about this accident and the road it's on?
Well, hi, John. Look, at the moment, I'm currently standing on the intersection of Westdale Road and Maisie Road. That the State Highway 60 intersects with this part of the road that basically can be best described as the area between Richmond and Mapua. Just in the last 10 minutes or so, I've just been watching the remnants of a severely damaged caravan being lifted onto 2 large truck and trailer units, which are sort of the last remaining clean-up vehicles on the scene. I've been here for about an hour and a half watching the slow clean-up of some pretty terrible debris, including that involved a truck carrying scaffolding. I understand a lot of that scaffolding was scattered over the road, and the accident also involved a 4-wheel drive, a caravan, and a small car.
Interesting piece of road. There is a corner just before the accident scene, right? There's double yellow lines. There seems to be a turning point, and it wasn't, we're told, a head-on collision, although I don't have that confirmed. Do you know any of the circumstances in which this occurred, Tracy?
At the moment, John, I have none of that detail. It's just all I can say is that this accident happened very near a fatal accident 2 years ago, in which residents at the time campaigned for safety improvements on this intersection, and did get those improvements, including that turning lane that you're probably what you're looking at. It is a narrow, winding road. It's become an increasingly busy road in the last few years, with massive population and tourism explosion in this area. But unfortunately, at this point, I don't have the exact details of what has happened here.
Thank you, Tracy. Tracy Neal live at the scene. 2 people have died and several, 5 perhaps more, have been injured after that very nasty crash on the coastal highway. We turn now to the TPP and the cost of New Zealand's pursuit of the agreement, as Donald Trump looks to rework his refugee ban, all the while denying it is a refugee ban, as he attempts to plug leaks and conducts a Twitter invective against CNN and the New York Times. Amongst the campaign promises he's actually managed to implement is pulling the US out of the TPP. And with the US gone, the agreement's appeal to other large signatories like Japan in particular is radically diminished. So on the surface, that's 5 years of negotiations down the drain, although we'll soon hear from Todd McClay, who'll tell us doors do remain open. And while the total cost of negotiating the deal may never be known, documents obtained by Checkpoint under the Official Information Act revealed travel costs for one ministry alone were more than $4 million. Here's Zach Fleming with the details.
Between 2010 and 2015, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade spent more than $4 million sending its staff to negotiate the 12-country Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. Nearly $900,000 on accommodation, nearly $2.5 million on flights, and nearly $800,000 on other costs like meals and taxis. And that's not including the travel costs of the Trade and Foreign Affairs ministers themselves, and not including wage or salary costs. Auckland University law professor and long-time opponent of the TPP, Jane Kelsey, says the government needs to release the total, given the deal was scrapped by new US President Donald Trump in just his 3rd day in office.
I think the sum that we've got there is a drop in the bucket compared to what the actual costs have been. You've got a whole range of ministries that were involved, and you have massive numbers of people who are engaged over the 5 years.
Ms Kelsey says equally as important are other costs that can never be calculated.
In addition to the actual expenditure and the staff time, there are the opportunity costs of what not just the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, but many other ministries could have been doing with those resources in addressing the kinds of real problems that we face rather than chasing after this holy grail.
MFAT estimated the TPP would have added more than $2 billion a year to New Zealand's GDP by 2030. But opponents had concerns including sovereignty, the environment, copyright, and the influence of overseas business. New Zealand and Australia have committed to trying to salvage the TPP in some form, despite Japan saying they are not interested without the US involved. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
So one ministry, $4 million, and Checkpoint believes that is a small fraction of the total cost. But as a trading nation with a government committed to the TPP and any meaningful substitute or replacement agreements that might be on offer, Trade Minister Todd McClay thinks the $4 million we've identified from the one ministry was money well spent.
My view is that if New Zealand's not out arguing for better rights and fairer access for New Zealand exporters overseas and making the case on our behalf, then, John, nobody will. It was a very long negotiation, and it does take a lot of people. But I guess if you look at when the China agreement was negotiated, that effort, that resource and taxpayer money was well spent because of our exports to China now. And in as far as TPP is concerned, whilst it's clear the deal is finished, and as far as America is concerned, there are many other countries that have been saying to me over the last few weeks, it is still worth looking to see what the next steps might be and how can we take TPP forward, if at all we can.
OK, there's about 3 follow-up points, and I want to pick on them all. So let's go to the cost. Of course, that's just MFAT's cost. That does include you, Tim Grosser, the parties who travel with you. What do you think the overall spend on the non-TPP agreement was?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. I'd have to go and get some advice on that. Again, I've only been minister for the last year. But without question, we do spend money overseas on New Zealand's place and New Zealand's presence. And again, given the importance of trade and exports to every part of our economy, every part of our country, we have to be out there putting our best foot forward and opening up doors and negotiating agreements. So without question, every year we ask the Treasury and the Minister of Finance for funds to be able to do that, to run the network, and we're going to have to keep doing that because nobody owes New Zealand a living.
Are you having conversations with people behind closed doors, and if they're behind closed doors, you're unlikely to open those doors on checkpoint, in which everyone is just saying, actually, we've just got to see Donald Trump out and this agreement will be back? Are those conversations taking place? Because I've been told they are. Yeah,
so it's not behind closed doors. I've been pretty open about the countries I'm visiting and that I'm having conversations. Now, the detail of what we're talking about probably doesn't work at this stage, broadcast over the radio, but I visited 4 of the key components of TPP, at least in New Zealand, over the last couple of weeks: Japan, Australia, Singapore, Mexico last week. I've spoken to all of the other TPP countries except Brunei, who I will speak to before the end of this week. And we're doing this because New Zealand is the depository of the agreement. So we're sort of the guys that started it and we hold the pen, I suppose. I'm also doing it because I'm interested in their views and positions so that the New Zealand government can finally take a position. But all of the countries have said they do believe a common set of rules that business can rely upon across the Asia Pacific is important. They do believe that the TPP agreement is important and is a significant achievement. And so we're going to meet all of the ministers in Chile next month, where we will have a conversation and decide what the next steps forward might be. And so I think it's far too soon to say TPP is over, although I'm not sure what can be salvaged.
Sorry, can I come in there? So you said all the ministers, obviously all the ministers minus America, right?
That's right. So America is very clear that they're not involved in it.
And Japan is saying, show me the American money and you've got a deal. So without Japan, where do you stand?
Well, no, Japan is saying publicly, and also in my conversation with them, that countries should continue to ratify TPP. I mean, we've done our legislation last year. Japan has ratified. They're saying they still see the agreement as important. They want America in it. But they, as with New Zealand and other countries, are going to have to do some of the modelling to see what the value is of the agreement without the US. I think it's clear that the US won't take part in the foreseeable future.
For the time being, right?
Yeah.
OK. So how long did it take to negotiate the TPP from the very beginnings, the little acorn of that idea?
It's probably a good 8 years, I think.
So if you've got to see out 4 years of Donald Trump, I mean, do you see the point I'm making?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't think it's a matter of seeing out the current US administration. The PM's asked me to get up there when my equivalent is confirmed in place to start a conversation with them, because the world has to continue to trade with the US. But in the meantime, I guess there's a couple of questions that need to be answered, including, is it, do you sit back and wait for a change in any one part of the world? And my experience over the last year as trade minister is, trade doesn't stay still. People put in place protection, they take protection down. Where some doors appear, closed, less open than before, others will open up.
Right, what doors are opening? What doors are opening?
Yeah, certainly when I was in Mexico last week, they are very clear that they think there are 3 options we need to talk about. The first is what next steps there could be for TPP without a conclusion to knowing what they could be just yet. Secondly, what involvement could New Zealand and other countries play in the Pacific Alliance? And thirdly, what consideration should we give alternative to a bilateral deal with Mexico. And I'm hearing that from many of the other countries as well. So I suspect that what will happen, as there remains uncertainty around the role the US will play when it comes to trade, other opportunities will come up because countries who previously perhaps were more secure in that trading environment now realise that there is not the same certainty and they need to diversify their trading interests. So I think New Zealand's pretty well placed to take advantage of that, but I would caution it's been 4 weeks since the new administration, and that's a very short period of time in trade circles.
Todd McClay, the Trade Minister, one of the big issues that people who were objecting to the TPP in New Zealand had was the sovereignty issue and the potential loss of it and the power of Big Pharma and all those kinds of things. Is that mitigated with the US being absent from the agreement? Does it make you feel less concerned about the TPP? If you were concerned about it, we'd love your feedback on that, 2101, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. The time is 5:25. Thank you for being with us on RNZ. The youngest New Zealander ever to swim Cook Strait and the youngest female ever to swim it. She's 12 years old, Caitlin O'Reilly. She joins us shortly in the studio. And Starship's Hospital Child Safety Team says the government's not doing enough to get the message out about car seats after a policewoman pulled over a car full of 13 people, including 8 unrestrained children. The Prime Minister says he hears from employers 2 or 3 times a week that they are struggling to find enough New Zealanders to fill job vacancies, in many cases because they would not pass a drug test. Bill English was talking about the latest migration figures, which show record numbers of people coming into New Zealand to live or visit in the year to January. Official figures show more than 71,000, in fact 71,300 to be precise, people settled here in the year to Jan, beating the previous annual record set a month earlier. Last year, the Prime Minister, John Key, at the time said he continually heard from employers frustrated with New Zealanders' work ethic and drug problems. Mr English told reporters at his post-cabinet briefing this afternoon he's hearing the same things.
One of the hurdles these days is just passing the drug test. Under workplace safety, you can't have people on your premises that are under the influence of drugs, and a lot of our younger people can't pass that test. I'm just anecdotal evidence. People telling me that they open it for applications, they get people turning up, and it's hard to get someone to be able to pass the test. That's just one example. So, look, if you get around the country, you'll hear all sorts of stories, some good, some not so good, about Kiwis' willingness and ability to do the jobs that are available.
Bill English says the government can't do much to address this particular issue.
Particularly if these are younger people who are in every other respect capable of finding a job. Government tends to focus on keeping the more at-risk young people on track, getting them qualifications so that they can get to the start line for employment. Drug issues are a bit broader than that, and the government's got its methamphetamine strategy in place, but there's quite a challenge when it comes to employment, more so than it used to be, because it used to be quite acceptable to employ someone who was a regular drug user, but now under workplace safety you just can't do it.
Mr English says exceptions should not be made for people who are on drugs but who would otherwise be fit for the job, as that could not only put them at risk but also their colleagues. We wanted to talk to Mr English about this and press him on the examples he was getting, the employers who were talking about this kind of stuff, but he declined, or his office declined our invitation for him to be interviewed this evening. Caitlin O'Reilly is 12, and at 9:20 on Friday night she became the youngest female swimmer ever to swim Cook Strait. She was back home in Auckland today, and her mum brought her into the studio along with her swim coach John Gatfield, who also swam Cook Strait when he was 13 and held the record for the youngest New Zealander until Caitlin pipped him on Friday. It's an extraordinary feat. The sea through the strait is fast-moving, pretty cold even in summer, and demands strength and enormous willpower. I asked 12-year-old Caitlin, who was also doing her first ever studio interview, why she wanted to swim it.
I wanted to challenge myself. It was an amazing goal that I could complete.
And when did you decide that you wanted to swim Cook Strait?
About 10 months ago.
And your coach, who was sitting proudly beside you here, John, he did it, but he was the ripe old age of 13, right, when he did it? An old man, whereas you were 12. Or you still are 12. And so how did you train for it?
Just lots of long-distance trainings and lots of training.
And so do you train in the pool or the ocean or both?
Both.
And what sort of distances have you been swimming?
40k a week.
40k a week. And what time in the morning do you get up to swim 40k a week?
5:15.
5:15. And your mum, your mum is through there looking at us with your little sis. And does she get up? Does she drive you to the pool or wherever you're swimming?
Yeah.
So this is a real family effort, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And John, so you swam Cook Strait when you were 13?
Yep.
And when Caitlin came to you and said, I want to do it too, what did you say?
Oh, I was pumped, absolutely pumped. I love it when sort of my swimmers set themselves goals, especially when they're goals that beat my previous ones. So I'm all supportive of that.
Not only did Caitlin beat you in terms of age, she beat you in terms of time.
Exactly right. It was an unbelievable swim watching it. It's really hard to explain how impressive it was, especially as things start to get a little bit harder, sort of just gritting your teeth and getting through it. I mean, I was watching it and just going, I wouldn't want to hop in at all.
So you were in the boat alongside?
Yeah, I was in the IRB next to her.
And are there times when you hit tides or, you're really swimming hard and making very little progress?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the start, she was covering a lot of distance. It was about 4.5k an hour, so she was going pretty quick. In the middle there, as the tides start to change, you fight a little bit, so it can drop back to sort of 3k. So you got to sort of fight with it a little bit. You can be told that you're at halfway in, say, 3 hours, and the next half could take 5 to 6, depending on how the tides change. So it's nuts.
Yeah, absolutely nuts. What are you thinking about as you're swimming, Caitlin?
Nothing. I'm just zoned out, focusing on getting to the other side.
And are there times when you realise it's becoming quite hard and you're not making the same distance you had been making, where you think, I'm not sure I can keep this up? Or were you just so determined to make it that you were never going to give it up?
No, I was determined I wasn't going to give up.
Now, Wellington hasn't had the greatest summer, and bless it. And I say that as a Wellingtonian. And so what was the water like?
It was all right, but towards the end it got cold.
And you were swimming in a wetsuit, presumably?
No, I was just in my normal togs.
You mad bugger. So you swum Cook Strait in your normal togs?
Yep.
And how long were you in the water for?
7 hours and 19 minutes.
Which is actually a really good time, isn't it?
Incredible.
Yeah. So actually that compares with adult swimmers, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think I was talking to Phil Rush on the boat, and he said your average swim sort of 8.5 to 9 hours. So she's well below that. So she had a really good effort for the swim. So
what is it about Cook Strait? Why does this have such an important part in the swimming? I remember Meta McKenzie, swimming. I remember, this is a legendary swim, isn't it? Is it because the water is so hard?
That's the thing. I think, even though people sort of study the tides and you can get an idea on what's going to happen, often things don't go to the way that they're planned. So a lot of people use swimming Lake Taupo as prep, which is a 42-kilometre swim, so it's nearly double the distance. Obviously, meaning that Cook Strait is a tough swim. But Caitlin was fortunate enough not to do the Lake Taupo beforehand as a prep, because that would have been a pretty tiring one as well. So, yeah.
I'm not having a go at my own children, who I love to the sky and back and who I'm very proud of, but I think everyone who's in the possession of a 12 or 13-year-old in their family home, or who has had one, or who has been one, will admire your extraordinary tenacity. I mean, that is a hell of a thing to do, to swim for over 7 hours in that water. And I wonder what you're setting your mind on now. I mean, clearly, if you decide to accomplish something, you do. So what do you dream of?
One day, hopefully, to maybe represent New Zealand in the Olympic Games, maybe.
I like it.
Yeah, so do I. So do I. This is a proud coach. Because you are remarkable, because not only can you swim long distances, right, you've won some sprint events, like 100, you've won 100-metre races, haven't you?
Yeah, last year I won the 100 fly at a national event.
So you won the 100 fly at a national event, and you can swim Cook Strait. So have you got a preference for short distance fast swimming or long distance slow swimming?
Long distance.
And why is that?
I just enjoy it more than shorter distances.
Caitlin O'Reilly, watch that name. We've got John Gilbert on the phone. We're going to back announce Caitlin in a sec. John Gilbert, Academy Award winner for Haxel Ridge. Are you there?
I'm here, John.
Congratulations. What was that like when you're live on air? But you can say anything you like if you're holding that Oscar. What was it like?
I'm with my two oldest children and my wife, and it's going pretty nuts here, to be honest. It's unbelievable.
I'm not surprised.
Sorry?
I'm not surprised. When they called out your name, what is that moment like?
Well, it's, my heart's going at 200 miles an hour. I couldn't believe I actually won it. I had a loosely idea of, if I might say, a speech, and I sort of winged it, and it turned out all right, apparently, and I've got no idea what I said.
We played it on Checkpoint. You did very well. You remembered all the names and you were very generous and you did very well. As you're walking up to the stage, because editors, you are not spotlight seekers.
We're quiet people.
You spend your lives in small rooms looking at screens, and as you walk up to the stage and you're on the screen, what does it feel like?
Well, I just tried to not to trip over, and I just thought, okay, I just stay calm, and I got up there, and I was thinking about what I wanted to say, and I just tried to ignore the fact that there might have been 100 million people watching, and I just tried to sort of stay coherent and get what I wanted to say out. And I think I succeeded, but it was kind of an amazing moment, I've got to say.
We're delighted to talk to you, and I know lots of people want to. Just before you go, what is it about the editing in Hacksaw Ridge that won, do you think? What was it that the Academy loved better than all the other films? And by golly, that was a competitive category.
Well, it was a film that had, the first half it was standard drama, which has got its own challenges, and the second half was, a visceral battle. I've got it. My phone is going nuts. There's a visceral battle kind of thing with a lot of different kind of editing, and I think it was a really strong story. Like I said, an inspirational story that people reacted to, and people loved the film, and I was really happy to be a part of it, and so happy that it worked. And I didn't expect to win, but here I am. I did. So there you go.
Congratulations,
John. I have to go now, John.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. John Gilbert, who has just won an Academy Award for Best Editing in Hacksaw Ridge, his second nomination. He was previously nominated for the first in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Just back announcing Caitlin O'Reilly, 12 years old, the youngest New Zealander ever to swim Cook Strait, the youngest female ever to swim Cook Strait, and she was talking to us with her coach, John Gatfield, who himself swam it when he was 13. He is now a really inspirational coach up here in Auckland. It is 23 minutes to 27 minutes, 20 something. It's something, Anna Thomas.
Yeah, it's past 5:30 anyway.
Anna Thomas with the headlines.
The Prime Minister says the government is still hearing from employers that they're struggling to find enough New Zealanders to fill job shortages. And in many cases, it's because applicants would fail the required drug tests. Last year, John Key said he continually heard from employers frustrated with New Zealanders' work ethics and drug problems. Bill English says he's hearing the same thing about 2 or 3 times a week. The government has extended for a second time its support package for Kaikoura businesses hit by the quake. However, this time those based in the Wellington or Hutt areas will no longer be eligible. Unbelievable is how New Zealand film editor John Gilbert describes his Oscar for Best Editing on the war film Hacksaw Ridge. It's Gilbert's first Academy Award. He also won a BAFTA earlier this month. Indonesian police have exchanged gunfire with an attacker after a reported explosion in a government building in the city of Bandung. The attacker has been captured. A Northland dairy owner bashed on the head with a tyre iron says the home detention sentence given to his attacker is laughable. Hemant Lal says the hold-up in his Hikarangi store last July left him with severe headaches for 3 months and temporarily paralysed on one side. The Law Society is backing calls for an independent authority to be set up as a watchdog investigating complaints and failures by child, youth and family. The agency has admitted it failed by sending a toddler back into a pea-using household where he died. 2 people are dead and at least 4 seriously injured after a crash involving a truck carrying scaffolding, a 4-wheel drive, a caravan and a small car on Tasman's coastal highway. The road remains closed after the crash in the Redwood Valley between Richmond and Mapua. Detours are in place. And that's the news.
Thanks, Anna. Let's turn to business now. Less than a week after the Commerce Commission shot down Vodafone and Sky's tie-up, one of the big objectives, Spark, has done a deal with streaming video company Netflix. What does our business editor, Giles Beckford, think of that? Giles, what do you think of that?
Well, it's a somewhat logical expectation. We had not been too surprised. There have been some rumours for quite some time that Spark had been talking to Netflix, and clearly the Sky TV Vodafone merger would have cleared its mind and perhaps hurried it up a little to try and do a deal. Remembering Netflix is the extremely popular subscriber video streaming service. It has not Game of Thrones. I think it's the House of Cards is one of its top dramas. So for Spark, it gives them some more muscle, and it perhaps offers a reason for Spark subscribers to stay in there. They have been struggling to hold their custom and to attract new subscribers. And of course, it also throws down the gauntlet to Vodafone, saying, beat that, we've got Netflix. So Vodafone has to find its own way to struggle or to fight back in the competitive entertainment environment. One might think that it raises questions about Spark's own subscriber streaming service, Lightbox, and whether that in fact has a long-term future, but we'll wait and see. And perhaps Sky might feel a little aggrieved that Spark was leading the charge against them and was trying to kill down the merger, which in the end did happen, and they've taken advantage of that to tie up some exclusive content. So we'll wait and see what happens for the time being. It's all part of the changing environment and telecommunications scene. Rather interestingly, Spark says it doesn't want to be a telecommunications company anymore, doesn't want to be an ISP, which is an internet service provider. It wants to be a digital services provider. You can put your own acronyms together.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. An Australian company sniffing around one of our biggest radio broadcasting businesses.
Well, this is another part of the competitive media scene at the moment. Southern Cross Media, which is an Australian regional TV and radio operator, said it knocked on the door of NZME, which is the Herald and the radio network and the like, saying, we quite like your radio asset, which would give them News Talk ZB, The Hits and ZM chains, amongst other. Now, NZME has an exclusive merger deal with Fairfax New Zealand or Fairfax Australia for the New Zealand assets, and says, go away, we've got this deal going. We'll wait and see whether in fact that's extinguished Southern Cross's ambitions, because clearly if the Commerce Commission is of the same rather hard-edged, hard-nosed view that it was about Sky and Vodafone, then it might say to NZME and Fairfax Australia, I'm afraid your merger is not going to go ahead either, in which case that might bring back Southern Cross to sniff around the assets. It might also bring out the supposed phantom bidders that were sniffing around the New Zealand newspapers of Fairfax before Christmas, supposedly willing to pay up to about $120 million. And we'll get that Commerce Commission decision in the middle of next month.
Thanks, Charles. What did the markets do today?
Share market had an update, up 21 points at 7,079. The New Zealand dollar holding around 72 US cents and 93.5 Australian.
Giles Beckford, our business editor, live from Wellington. Thanks, Giles. Talk to you tomorrow. Let's move on now. A Northern dairy owner held up 9 times in 13 years is in despair over what he calls the joke sentence handed down for a robbery that could have killed him. He says 2 18-year-olds have been sentenced to home detention after one of them bashed shopkeeper Hemant Lal in the head with an iron bar. Mr Lal tells our reporter Lois Williams he's angry his attackers are receiving a benefit whilst on home detention, while he struggles to recover from his injuries.
Hemant Lal owns the Kingsland Dairy in Hikurangi, a small village just north of Whangarei. The shop's immaculate, sparkling windows, grocery shelves stacked with military precision, and an old-style display of sweets behind glass upon the counter. It was here last July that 18-year-old Eruera Wharirau whacked Mr Lal on the head with a tyre iron and demanded cash. Mr Lal ran from the shop and smashed the windscreen of the robber's car in a bid to foil their escape. It didn't work. He spent 3 days in hospital and suffered crippling headaches for months.
In the head, I was really badly hurt. At the back of my mind, on my head, it was all swollen. And what happened when that thing happened? All my left, this side, all paralyzed. At one stage, I want to close the shop. I really want to close it, but now I'm coming right. I got the right medicine. Thank God that Whangarei Hospital saved me.
In 13 years, Hemant Lal, father of 2 children, has been held up a total of 9 times, once at gunpoint and once by a robber who slashed his elderly father's hands with a knife as he cowered behind the counter. Mr Lal fought back that time too in defence of his dad. For his pains, he was charged with assault, a charge that was later dropped. The Hikurangi shopkeeper says the sentences handed down to those who've robbed him over the years have clearly been no deterrent to others. And it galls him to think that the latest batch of youths to have a crack at his life and livelihood are going to be sitting at home on a benefit while he continues to work.
It's a joke. It's not enough because they know they're going to get away with it. That's why they have done it. I want to know the public view. What does public say? They will be coming all sorts of answers, but all sorts of question as well. But is it enough? Doing something like that, hurting people who is working.
One of the youths, described as the getaway driver last July, was sentenced to 5 months home detention in Kaikohi's Matariki court last week. The court's a pilot scheme for young Māori offenders who are willing to plead guilty and take part in a restorative justice process, including a personal apology to the victim. The Moerewa elder Ngaho Davis, who helps run the scheme, says the boy in question was given a ride home from Polytech by mates who decided on the way to rob the Hikurangi dairy. He protested and never entered the store, but he did drive them away when told to. Mr Davis says the boy had no previous offences and comes from a family of teachers and police officers prepared to keep a close eye on him.
He's never been in trouble before. If we can get to this boy and do the work, this will never happen again. That's the other side of the coin. But
the lead offender, Eruera Whariro, who Mr Lal says ruined his life for months, was sentenced in the Whangarei District Court to 9 months home detention. Mr Lal's neighbour, Diane Crow, says that just doesn't seem right.
Him and his wife and children are the nicest people, just wonderful. And, this is just disgusting. These young kids think they can just do everything. Don't care.
Hemant Lal says he's sometimes thought of selling up and leaving Hikurangi, but he says he can't and won't give up the business his family has worked so hard to build, despite the risk he faces every day at the Kingsland Dairy. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
Thanks, Lois. 13.5 to 6. La La Land has just won the Oscar for Best Directing. Starship Hospital's child safety team says it's unacceptable that children are dying because they're not wearing car seats and the government's not doing enough to get the message out. Their call comes after a policewoman talked of fighting back tears of anger. She found 13 people crammed into a people mover in West Auckland, most of the children unrestrained. Some of those working at the grassroots say the message isn't getting through to enough people. Here's our reporter, Rowan Quinn.
Constable Cheryl Pearce says her heart sank when she opened the door and saw adults and children with other children on their knees, including a tiny baby. She says she issued some tickets but didn't want to overdo it so that the adults could have money to buy car seats. The principal of West Auckland's Decile 1 Birdwood School, Jenny Bernard, says she does see children getting into cars without booster seats and sometimes sharing seatbelts. She says for some families, booster seats can be a big cost.
For some of them, getting food on the table is far more a priority than getting a booster seat for their child.
Ms Bernard says overcrowding can happen as families help each other out with school pickups. She believes there's not enough education directed where it's needed most and would like to regularly see people giving advice in schools. That sentiment shared by the head of Starship's child safety advocacy group Safe Kids, Anne Weaver. She says it was a major setback when Plunkett stopped renting out car seats, and after a law change nearly 4 years ago requiring children under the age of 7 to have a booster seat, government publicity dropped right back.
I think, with the lack of education, the lack of investment, people like Plunkett pulling out, this is the result. We're seeing increased numbers of children not travelling safely.
The police say road deaths due to people not having car seats have increased from 57 in 2014 to 92 in 2015 to more than 100 last year. An average of 18 unrestrained children die each year. Ms Weaver says the government really needs to step up to get the message out.
We have a new cohort of parents coming through all the time, so you can't stop and think, oh, we've done that, we've increased the legislation. Everyone knows now that their children need to be in a car seat, and you leave it up to the parent to decide. That doesn't work. You actually do need to continue the education.
The head of Auckland Police's motorway group, Stephen Sayer, says though 13 mostly unrestrained people in the car is very rare, they do regularly see children without seatbelts. He says even if it's a short car trip around the corner, children should have proper seatbelts, and it's terrifying to think of them unrestrained at motorway speeds.
It's upsetting for the police that stop those vehicles, and it's really around an education and making sure that the parents are aware that it's their responsibility to ensure the children are well restrained in a vehicle, because that's not a choice the children have themselves.
Stephen Sayer says they try to educate parents at a grassroots level, and Constable Pearce did the right thing. Plunkett says it was not financially viable for it to continue its car seat rental service, but it still works very hard to get the car seat message out to parents. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
The government admits it's using incomplete data to address the problem of housing New Zealand's most vulnerable people. As well as a big budget blowout on emergency housing, the government has revealed it's unable to keep records of how long people are waiting for social housing. Why? Here's our political reporter, May Heron.
The government has already used 4 times its annual budget for emergency housing in just 3 months. In the last 3 months of last year, 8,870 emergency housing grants were paid out, totalling $7,735,000. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says the scale of the problem was largely unknown when the budget was first set. He says the government is working to get more information on those most in need, but it is difficult.
Because in the past governments haven't addressed these most complex social problems in a direct way, there's not much data. And secondly, it's hard to have data about people you can't find. And that's increasingly the case as we do dig into these hard problems.
So given the incomplete data, does Mr English expect more budget blowouts?
Well, you can expect probably more spending as we uncover, significant complex demand. And it's not the ones we're talking about here with the motels. It'll be partly driven by, pressure in the housing market, but a lot of it is just driven by actually uncovering what's been a long-running problem.
In written responses to questions from the Green Party, the government has also revealed it's not possible to track how long people are waiting for social housing, as people's circumstances are always changing. It says, for example, if an applicant fails to supply information or cannot be contacted, the application is suspended. Scott Figgenshaw, the Chief Executive of Community Housing Aotearoa, says there's been a lack of good information about the demand for emergency housing, social housing and even affordable housing.
The data figure, though, we've always known about is the Otago University School of Medicine work that Dr. Kate Amori did, showing that we have 41,000 inadequately housed New Zealanders. And so if we look at that number compared with the number that's on the social housing register, there's a big difference between the two. And it looks like that we're learning what that number is by the high numbers of people coming forward seeking the grant assistance. So in some ways, it's no surprise that these figures are being consumed at substantially higher rates than what were budgeted for.
The government says it's currently gathering more information and will soon publish a detailed evaluation of long-term social housing. But opposition parties are questioning why it's taken this long. The Green Party MP, Marama Davidson, blames the government for not having the information.
That's because they are disconnected from what is happening and they haven't made any effort to find out. After how many agencies telling the national government that there is a crisis, and the national government can't even put those two words next to each other in their vocab.
The Labour leader, Andrew Little, says if the government did do its research, it would find that the people needing emergency housing are hard-working and are not all on the benefit.
I've met them, I've seen them, I've heard the stories. These are people who are trying to hold down jobs. They're not people who are, who are all on a benefit and using other social services. A lot of these are people who have been priced out of the rental market because the government won't accept that there is a housing crisis.
The government has pointed to the $300 million it's budgeted over 4 years for emergency housing and says it's addressing housing problems in ways that have never been done before. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
Coming up to 6 to 6, Oscar for actor in a leading role has gone to Casey Affleck for Manchester by the Sea. We head to Birkdale now, beside Beach Haven on Auckland's North Shore, where Barry Milne is selling his family home by tender. So far, so typical. But Barry's 84 and is moving into a retirement village, and he wants a first home buyer to purchase the home that has meant so much to his wife and himself. So his tender is a bit unusual. Barry isn't interested in the highest price. He wants the right buyer, someone not already in the property market, someone desperate for their first home, someone who will love it like he has.
Well, when I moved in and I looked in for a family home and everything, and I've lived here for 49 years now, and I just think, well, it's time for me to move on, and I'd just like to see another family come in.
Do you remember how much you paid for it? Is that a rude question?
No, but it was $9,000 at the time, which they said was a bit pricey, and but even then I had to take out a triple mortgage for it.
A triple mortgage? What were you earning? Roughly what was that in terms of your household income?
It was about $72 a fortnight.
Gosh, the world's changed, hasn't it? Although it's hard to absolutely assess that. But in terms of your ability to service that loan, it would have been much easier then than it is for young people now, right?
Oh yes, I would say so. I came here on originally in what they called a government servant on transfer, and the money there was 7% interest. And then the other mortgage I took out was 7 also. But then the housing corporation took over and it dropped to 5%, which made a big difference. And then after a while they decided I was qualified for a rehab loan, and it dropped to 3%. So in the long run, I finished up very well off.
Yeah, good. And did you raise a family there?
No, I had the family already when I came here.
Yeah.
And one of the points of coming here we liked was that the fact we could walking to the primary school, the intermediate school and the college, and walk to the doctors, the shops, the bus. So, you could walk everywhere with everything. So, although I had an old bomber of a car, the kids didn't need it, and the wife was okay. And so any time I was away, anybody could walk to wherever they wanted.
Yeah, it sounds good. And so have you been watching the media coverage over the past year or two of how difficult it is for young people to get into homes in Auckland now?
Yes, I have. It's a lot to do with it. I'd say I wouldn't like the idea of a developer coming in and sort of ripping the place down and putting up some sites or pulling the place apart and then renting it out sort of thing. I'd far rather it went to a nice young family.
So Barry, describe the house to us. What is it? What are you selling?
Well, it's a 3-bedroom house. It's just decent size. It's got a good section. The back, tons of room for kids. It's flowers bushes all around in there. And it's got a good outlook as well. You look out over a gully right across. So it's in there, and the reason I'm selling, I just have to accept the fact now I'm just too old to look after it.
So it's selling by tender, and the only people who are allowed to tender are first-home buyers, so they're people who are not in the housing market.
I'm not too sure of that. Ray White Real Estate are handling the open homes and that sort of thing and accepting the tenders, but they have put up that they prefer a first-home buyer, So, and they have got some people interested in already, so... And next weekend is the last of the open homes, and then they're going to come up to me with all the people who've shown interest and go through and see who would be interested in getting the place.
So you won't necessarily pick the highest price. You'll pick the right people.
That's right, yep. Well, I am an advantage in the fact that I'm not selling to make a profit to move up in the world.
Huh.
I'm going to a retirement village up in Burns Corner, so that's it. So I don't need to make a big profit.
And do you know people in the retirement village?
Yes, I do. I know a few people up there. And but it's, I'd say about a couple of weeks ago, just outside, and I looked down and said, no, it is too much for you. And that's it. Like the grounds, there is a lot they're doing out there. But anybody who's keen on gardening and sort of bushes and plants and trees and that sort of thing, it's a real heaven for them.
What have been your favourite plants? What are the treasures for you? What do you love best of all in your garden?
Hydrangeas.
Yeah. It's the colour, isn't it?
That's right, yep.
Yeah, they're joyful plants.
And I've got some big orange ones right out at the moment up the back of the section.
Have you showing off?
Yeah, right on.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, we hope it goes to someone who enjoys it and loves it and lives there as long as you have, Barry.
I'd love that to happen, yep. That would be my, pleasure in life. And, as I say, I can't bear the thought of being mercenary.
You can't bear the thought of being what?
Mercenary.
No.
Gap out for everything I could get. And so if I get quite happy with what people want, so that's fine.
Barry Mill, who's selling his home by tender, but not to the highest bidder, to a first home buyer who will love it and cherish it like he has. Emma Stone has just won actress in a leading role for La La Land. Lots of feedback coming in on the government's suggestion that people can't get jobs because they are all failing drug tests. Text us 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz at 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. The Prime Minister says he hears from employers 2 or 3 times a week that they're struggling to find enough New Zealanders to fill job vacancies, in many cases because they'd failed the drug test. Bill English was asked today why the government allows foreign workers into New Zealand when unemployment is still high. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Mr English says immigration is a matter of continual balance, with employers unable to find New Zealand workers in many parts of the country. He says, like his predecessor John Key, he often hears anecdotal stories about applicants' inability to pass a drug test being a problem. Mr English says in many cases they'd be fine to do the job in every other aspect. He says, however, exceptions should not be made for such people, as they could be putting themselves and their colleagues at risk. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade spent more than $4 million sending its staff around the world to negotiate the now-defunct Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact. Documents obtained by RNZ News show it spent nearly $2.5 million on flights alone. The Trade Minister, Todd McLeay, told Checkpoint he doesn't know the total cost to the government, but it was money well spent.
My view is that if New Zealand's not out arguing for better rights and fairer access for New Zealand exporters overseas and making the case on our behalf.
Todd McLeay says he believes the TPP can be renegotiated without the US. The Northland MP Winston Peters says the robber who bashed a Whangarei dairy owner should be given hard labour, not home detention. Hemant Lal, who owns the Kingsland Dairy in Hikurangi, was hit in the head with a tyre iron and suffered headaches and temporary paralysis after the attack last July. It's the 9th time he's been robbed in 13 years. 2 of those involved have been given home detention sentences of 9 and 5 months. Mr Peters, who knows Mr Lal personally, says that's a joke.
It's really a rap over the wrist with a wet bus ticket. And we need to change our sentencing options here. These 2 guys should have been put to work 6 days a week and to make up and atone for the kind of crime that they have committed.
The Northland MP and New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters. The county's Manukau District Health Board is still trying to contact just over 100 families affected by the dental health scare at Pukakoi Intermediate School Dental Clinic. Faulty equipment put 2,500 children at risk of infection from HIV and hepatitis B and C. The board's acting chief medical officer, David Hughes, says there have been no cases of infection in the 1,500 children tested so far. More than 95% of parents and caregivers, some of whom have declined tests, have been contacted. The DHB says it will work with GP practices and public health nurses to find the remaining 106 families. A gynaecologist faces possible legal action for inserting an intrauterine contraceptive device without the patient's consent. The unnamed Dr. B inserted the Marina brand device at a private hospital in 2015. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
Dr. B inserted the device after the equipment needed for an alternative procedure for heavy menstrual bleeding failed. He said a Marina was the safest and most easily reversible option, avoiding the need for another anaesthetic later. But the patient had not given verbal or written consent and demanded its removal immediately she knew. The Health and Disability Commissioner, Anthony Hill, has referred the case to the Director of Proceedings, saying informed consent is at the heart of consumer rights and the patient was deprived of it. This is Karen Brown.
A Greymouth rest home will be closed next month because of what the Health Ministry called sustained risk and non-compliance issues. After a recent audit, the Ministry withdrew its certification for Kōwhai Manor, which is operated by Kiwiania Care and currently has 24 residents. The Ministry says the audit report is still being processed and is not publicly available yet. A spokesperson for the Canterbury and West Coast DHB at Carolyn Gullery says it's trying to find new homes for the residents, but there is limited aged residential care available on the West Coast. A New Zealander has won an Oscar at today's Academy Awards ceremony in Los Angeles. John Gilbert won the award for Best Editing for his work on the war film Hacksaw Ridge, directed by Mel Gibson. The Wellington editor gave a shout out to his family as he accepted his Oscar.
Up there's my Max and Lily. Where are you? Yeah, and Lucia and Amelia back in New Zealand. I hope you're watching. Thank you very much. I appreciate this so much.
John Gilbert and another New Zealander, Dan Lemon, also won an Oscar along with other animators for Best Visual Effects in the Jungle Book. It's at 6:05. To sport. And New Zealand cyclists Raquel Sheath and Michaela Drummond have won silver in the Women's Madison at the Track World Cup in Los Angeles. Fellow New Zealand cyclist Jamie Nielsen earlier won bronze in the women's individual pursuit. The men's sprint team take on Germany in the gold medal final later tonight. Manchester United have won their first trophy under manager Jose Mourinho, beating Southampton 3-2 in English football's League Cup final at Wembley. Swedish striker Zlatan Ibrahimovic scored twice, including the late winner, and Mourinho felt his side struggled because of the heavy schedule.
For the neutral, I think it's a phenomenal football match. People is waiting for extra time and the victory goal arrives. I think phenomenal, but for us hard and difficult because easy to feel the difference of freshness. They were fresher, they were sharper, they were quicker.
Jose Mourinho in the Premier League, Tottenham beat Stoke 4-0. And the Parramatta Eels have stood down New Zealand-born back rower Kenny Edwards indefinitely now that the rugby league forward has pleaded guilty to a low-level domestic violence-related common assault charge. Edwards was sentenced to a 6-month good behaviour bond in Parramatta today after he admitted spraying his former partner with water and pouring alcohol on her during an argument. And that's the news.
This week on Nights, our poison professor Leo Shep on paracetamol, because too much will do more than just cure your headache. Zachary Crockett discusses the influence Disney Corporation appears to have on US copyright law. It's totally Mickey Mouse. Well, this week's cultural ambassador James Brown discusses fluff poetry. Poetry designed to be clunky, incoherent, banal, whatever poetry isn't meant to be. On Nights with me, Crump Ryan, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the Met Service short forecast until midnight tomorrow. Auckland, Northland and the Coromandel Peninsula, fine spells and isolated showers. Waikato to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Mainly fine, but scattered showers during the afternoons and evenings, mostly inland, where some will be heavy with isolated thunderstorms. Possible localised downpours tomorrow about inland Waikato, Waitomo, Taumaranui, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly cloudy, a few showers mainly about the ranges, some heavy during the afternoons and evenings with possible thunderstorms. Fine spells increasing tomorrow. Manawatu to Wellington and Wairarapa, also Marlborough, Nelson and Buller. Fine or becoming fine, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Westland, Fiordland, Southland, Otago and Canterbury mostly fine. Areas of cloud or fog morning and evening. Cloud more persistent about coastal Southland. Isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, fine today, becoming cloudy overnight. And you're on Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you very much, Anna Thomas. 8 and a bit past 6. New Zealander John Gilbert has taken out gold at this year's Academy Awards, where he won an Oscar for Best Editing. Another New Zealander, Dan Lemon, has also won an Oscar alongside other animators for Best Visual Effects for The Jungle Book. We're going to look at the big picture of the Oscars and who's won what shortly. But first, John Gilbert, the Kiwi, he told me a short time ago what it was like to win.
You know, I just tried to not to trip over, and you know, I just thought, okay, I just stay calm, and I got up there, and I was thinking about what I wanted to say, and I just tried to ignore the fact that there might have been 100 million people watching, and I just tried to sort of stay coherent and get what I wanted to say out. And I think I succeeded, but it was kind of an amazing moment, I've got to say.
What is it about the editing in Hacksaw Ridge that won, do you think? What was it that the Academy loved better than all the other films? And by golly, that was a competitive category.
Well, it was a film that had, you know, the first half it was standard drama, which it got its own challenges, and the second half was, you know, a visceral battle kind of thing with a lot of different kind of editing. And I think it was a really strong story, like I said. You know, an inspirational story that people reacted to, and people loved the film, and, you know, I was really happy to be a part of it, and so happy that it worked. And I didn't expect to win, but here I am, I did, so there you go.
Wonderful. John Gilbert winning Best Editor, talking to us live a short time ago. Let's go back to the Oscars live again. Sandro Monetti, entertainment journalist, a rather wonderful one, is at the Oscars in LA. Sandro, it's lovely to talk to you. It's a year since our last conversation, and I think you've got a Best Picture there. Have you got a Best Picture winner?
La La Land has just been named Best Picture in the last few seconds. That makes a total of 7 Oscars for La La Land, and very much the hometown favourite here in LA. But it was nominated for 14. John Gilbert's Hacksaw Ridge, you know, was one of the categories where it lost. But on the whole, it's the big winner. It's the musical is back.
Yes. Yes. Here, look, Emma Stone winning Best Actress in a leading role for La La Land. No real surprises there, I don't think, were there?
No, there weren't. I mean, it's funny. There's so many awards going into this, so you could have scripted it, and it was very much expected that Emma Stone will win, and quite right, it should win as well, because La La Land, in my opinion, and the opinion of many critics and audiences, is just a joyous movie. And I think here in the United States, there's been so much bad news lately, and so much fake news. The truth is that La La Land is a movie that makes everybody happy, and the makers are especially happy tonight. They've got 7 Oscars.
Yeah, boy, that's good at the box office too, isn't it? Can we talk about Oscars so wide? April Rain has been a regular guest on our program, the woman behind that campaign, and there has been a less white Academy Awards this year, but has the diversity been as great as people like April might have hoped? How's it looked?
5 African-American Oscar winners tonight. That's the most in one Oscar ceremony in history. The victories include Mahershala Ali from Moonlight, Best Supporting Actor, Viola Davis from Fences, Best Supporting Actress. So, yes, that change is noticeable, but there's still so much work to be done. Numbers don't lie, you know, and let me tell you the percentages with the membership of the Academy. When I say the Academy, I mean the 7,000 people who vote for the Oscars. Of that group, it's 93% white, 67% male, and the average age of the Oscar voter is 63. Now, after all the publicity for the Oscars so white, and that was 2 years running when there were no nominees of colour, I think this year, largely by pressure, largely by quality of movies, the voters were prepared to look more seriously at movies they might otherwise dismiss or not even watch. And that's certainly been reflected in the Oscars that have handed out. And the Academy has changed its membership rules. They say they will double within 4 years. The members who are people of colour, and also double the number of women in the Academy. So that's certainly to be applauded, because after all, movies reflect the real world, and the voters should reflect that audience as well.
Sandra Monetti, live from the Oscars. Thank you so much, Sandra. It's lovely to talk to you. So La La Land has won Best Film. It also took out Best Actress for Emma. Emma, because my mind's gone black. Emma Stone and Casey Affleck for Manchester by the Sea won Best Actor. Let's go to Auckland now. Auckland police are seeking public help to identify a man who was the last person to have seen a woman before she was viciously assaulted in the early hours of Sunday morning. The young woman endured what police describe as a very disturbing, nasty attack, waking up in a quarry in Riverhead, finding herself injured and a man standing over her with a bat. Joining us now on the phone is Detective Senior Sergeant Kim Libby. Kim, are you there?
Yeah.
Hello.
Good
Gosh,
evening, John.
hello. I've heard absolutely nothing about this. What can you tell us about it?
Well, basically, the young lady was attending the Pride Parade on with friends in Ponsonby Road. They were enjoying themselves, and at some stage, it looks like she sort of met a chap, and this was all about 10:20 p.m. when she last sort of recalls what happened, and then she's got a major memory blank and comes to at the quarry at Riverhead.
Unbelievably terrifying. The victim was caught on CCTV footage in Ponsonby on Sunday night. There's a hell of a lot of CCTV cameras along Ponsonby Road. Do you have somebody of interest in terms of a potential suspect?
Well, we have the last man that was with her that is obviously a witness, or potentially the man that has abducted her from the area. So we've got his photo, which we've publicised. We're trying to identify that guy so that we could carry on with inquiries and speak to him as soon as possible.
Okay, I'm looking at him now. So they're at a petrol station. He appears to be at a petrol station. We want to stress that he may not be involved at all, but he could help with police with their inquiries. He looks, can you describe him for me? Thick set, what sort of age?
Well, just going on what you can see there, it's a bit pixelated, but he looks, mid to late 30s to 40, reasonably solid build, not extra tall. He's wearing like a collared shirt with knee-length shorts, and he's got very noticeable either dark or navy blue Nike sport shoes.
And looks Pākehā, Caucasian?
It's quite hard, but he looks Caucasian with very short hair or perhaps balding.
Okay, so anyone who knows anything about this is really urged to contact you guys, right? DSS Detective Senior Sergeant Kim Libby. Kim, where should they call? Where should people call?
Well, they could ring any police station, but at the moment we've put out a phone number, which is, if we don't answer, it can be a message can be left, and that is 021 191 4085.
Can you say that number again?
021 191 4085.
Thank you so much, DSS Kim Libby. Anyone who knows anything about that, it began with these people meeting each other on Ponsonby Road at the Pride Parade on Saturday night. I cannot believe what I'm about to tell you. Warren Beatty, is this a true story, gave the wrong name of the best picture, and in fact everyone got it wrong, including the Academy's own Twitter feed. So it wasn't La La Land, it was Moonlight. I think that is right. I don't think this is an elaborate practical joke. No, Moonlight is best film ahead of La La Land, a stunning film directed by Barry Jenkins. Moonlight, absolutely stunning. The Crown has outlined a tale of jealousy, drugs, prostitution and violence on a level described by a prosecutor as unimaginable. It says a woman was threatened with death before being kidnapped twice. On the second occasion, she was sexually violated, had her arms and legs bound before being driven to a remote road north of Auckland, where there was an attempt to strangle her and break her neck before she was struck in the head with a hammer. Our Auckland court reporter, Edward Gay, has been in court and filed this report.
Nicola Jones, Cameron Hakeke, Michelle Blom and Julianne Torrance face charges including kidnapping, assaults using a taser and scissors, and robbery. Miss Jones and Miss Blom also face charges of sexual violation and attempted murder. Wayne Blackett has admitted charges of attempted murder and assault. The Crown Prosecutor Henry Steele said the victim was found by two people, unconscious, dressed in overalls and her hair crudely cut off.
Her head was bloodied and her face bruised. Her hands and feet were bound with cable ties. The grass around her had been flattened by her desperate movements over the course of the preceding 10 hours. Through the night, on the side of a dirt road, halfway through the Dome Valley, her skull having been smashed with a hammer.
Mr. Steele said the victim was left for dead. He said the attack was sparked by Miss Jones accusing the victim of sleeping with her boyfriend. In January, she sent a threatening text message to the woman's mother saying she would kill her if she saw her. Mr. Steele said 3 months later a mutual friend, Cameron Hakeke, lured the woman to his West Auckland home with talk of methamphetamine in April last year. Once inside, she was ambushed.
She's taken to the ground as soon as she walks through the door. She's restrained and thereafter she's tasered repeatedly. Her hair is cut off. She's eventually forced to sign over her car, which contains her worldly belongings.
2 weeks later, Miss Jones was with her friends Miss Blom, Miss Torrance and another Jacqueline Keats. They spotted the victim again near K Road, dragged her into her car and drove her to another house in West Auckland.
And it's there where the fun really starts, because that's what this is to them.
The woman was beaten by people armed with a cricket bat and a cricket wicket. Her hand was held down and stomped on and her hair was cut off again. She was also sexually violated. The following day she was bundled into Blackett's ute, her hands and legs bound and driven to a road north of Auckland by Miss Jones, Miss Torrance and Blackett.
It's there an attempt is made to strangle her. And when this doesn't work, they attempt to break her neck. Manually. Like something out of a cheap kung fu movie.
Mr. Steele said a hammer was then grabbed from Blackett's ute and the woman was hit at least 7 times in the skull. A CT scan showed the holes in her head.
This was a determined and prolonged attack, intended clearly to kill. Make no mistake of that. The fact she didn't die and the charge is only one of attempted murder is nothing short of a miracle.
Mr. Steele said the woman will give evidence via closed-circuit television from another courtroom, but he asked the jury to keep in mind that she was still recovering from her brain injury. The jurors will hear evidence from over 60 witnesses over the coming 4 weeks. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gay-aho.
Over the weekend, a New Zealander was involved in a record-setting sporting feat that may take some beating. Amy Satterthwaite scored a century for New Zealand against Australia, to follow her century for New Zealand against Pakistan, to follow her century for New Zealand against Pakistan, to follow her century for New Zealand against Pakistan. She had painful cramps. She could be forgiven for tiring after her 3 previous centuries, and she was facing Australia, against whom New Zealand has not won a series this century. But not only did Amy Satterthwaite help steer the White Ferns to victory, she did something no other woman in the history of cricket has ever done, and only one man has ever done, scored centuries in 4 consecutive one-day internationals. The man was Sri Lankan great Kumar Sangakkara, and now Amy has joined him. We called the White Ferns on their team bus travelling to Tauranga. Amy Satterthwaite was in the back seat beside Susie Bates, whose own batting average, by the way, is over 40 after nearly 100 games. And I asked her about being the first woman in international cricket history to score 4 centuries in a row.
Yeah, it is a bit crazy. I think it's pretty special to be alongside Kumar. He's certainly someone that growing up was a bit of an idol for me, so it's pretty special to share that with him.
You know, you talk about when you were growing up you had idols. There were a lot of youngsters at the ground yesterday at Eden Park, weren't there?
Yeah, there were. We had a lot of girls coming up to us when we were sort of fielding on the boundary and wanting our autographs, and it was just awesome to see the amount of support just growing and growing over the last sort of couple of years, and having those girls there, I guess, like you say, seeing potential idols for them, and hopefully, having players to look up to and inspire them to hopefully pick up a bat or a ball and play the game. It's just awesome.
You really are role models for those youngsters. They were wide-eyed in their adoration and admiration.
Yeah, it's, I guess, a different kind of playing field for us at the moment, being role models for them. We're sort of not used to, I guess, having that kind of tag, but it's certainly nice to be growing the game, and the way that it's sort of changed in the last couple of years has been phenomenal, and just really awesome to see the amount of girls that are following it and, like I said, hopefully enjoying watching.
You've scored 477 runs in your past 4 innings and only gone out once. And I've tried in advance of the interview to work out what the secret is. It seems that you're putting less pressure on yourself during quiet periods. Is that one of the things?
Yeah, I think that's been a big key for me. I think in the past I probably would have thrown my wicket away when I've got bogged down a little bit. And I've certainly, I guess, had the support around me of players that have come in and played key sort of innings when I've been struggling a little bit, and it's allowed me just to sort of bat through and then thankfully kind of kick on near the end, which has just been working at the moment.
Has the ball been big? Have you been seeing it just really, really well?
Well, I think against Pakistan I was seeing it pretty well. I think of late I haven't probably seen it as well as I'd like, but you try and just sort of push through that, and even when it's not feeling 100%, it doesn't really matter what it looks like or feels like. To a certain extent, it's just a case of scoring runs, and thankfully it's kind of happening at the moment.
It's kind of happening. It is kind of happening. 477 in 4 innings with only 1 dismissal. That's kind of happening, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I just enjoy winning, to be honest, and I'm just wanting to help contribute towards that and just have team success. So I know that the Rose Bowl's been a big thing for us that we've sort of been missing for the last 17 years. So it would be a massive thing to win that and just trying to contribute towards getting that success.
And they are 1-0 up in the series against Australia. Amy Satterthwaite, 4 centuries on the trot. A Wairarapa woman who travelled the equivalent of 12 times around the world to be on a drug trial has been granted compassionate use of the drug for the rest of her life at a hospital just 5 minutes from home. Alison Locke, who suffers from the incurable degenerative Pompe disease, had flown to Auckland and Brisbane once a fortnight for 5 years as part of a medical trial run by drug company Biomarin. But when that trial was cancelled without notice last year, the mother of 2 was facing a really bleak future. At $500,000 per patient per year, Pharmac had deemed the drug way too expensive. But then, out of the blue, without any discussion, a rival drug company stepped in.
Well, I got a phone call on Friday, late afternoon, from our doctor in Auckland saying that we had been granted humanitarian use of the medicine that we've been waiting for years. And it's just fabulous news.
Who granted you it? Who was the humanitarian who granted it?
Well, it was Genzyme Sanofi. It's the drug company that make this drug. They didn't have to give it to us, but we were turned down again by Pharmac in January, and they just said, well, we have to help you.
So, Alison, you were part of a trial for a different drug that did the same thing with a different company. That trial ended, and as we discussed on Checkpoint previously, it ended in the most unsentimental terms. You were just cut adrift, basically.
We were, yeah.
And your prognosis was terrible, wasn't it?
It is. It is without this medication, yes.
And another drug company has stepped up and said, we have a similar product and you can have it on humanitarian grounds, compassionate grounds.
That's right.
Out of the blue.
Wonderful. Yep.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah. Oh, we're just over the moon about it. Absolutely.
And so, previously, how many times did you go to Brisbane for treatment? We've discussed this on Checkpoint before. How many times have you left the Wairarapa and gone across the Tasman for treatment?
I can't remember how many times it was exactly, but it was 3 years, every fortnight. Every fortnight for 3, and then I went to Auckland every fortnight for 1.5 years, and to Florida for 6 months, but I stayed there. That was at the beginning. So 5 years all up of travelling.
Of almost constant travel, of almost constantly coming and going.
Yep, and now I can get this medication compassionately at my local hospital, which is less than 5 minutes up the road.
And your local hospital.
I can't believe it.
No. It's kind of unbelievable.
I know. I don't know if it's sunk in really.
So your local hospital's Masterton, is it?
Yes.
So you've previously
5 minutes from my house.
It's lovely. So you've previously gone to Auckland, Florida, and Brisbane. Brisbane so many times that, in fact, there was an estimate that you've travelled millions of Ks in total. And now you get to drive to the local hospital, get a drug from another company that you've never dealt with before, who's giving it to you for free.
That's right. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I haven't got enough thanks. All the words to say how grateful I am for this. And it's not just me. There's 3 others getting it too. There's 10 patients in New Zealand now Unfortunately, we lost one over the holidays.
Lost one. So
yes.
Whilst they were waiting for treatment, they died.
They did, yeah.
As a result of their condition.
Of Pompe disease,
yeah.
Respiratory failure due to Pompe disease. He was one of the founding members of our New Zealand Pompe network, so he was our vice president. He was only 54, John. So he died waiting for Farmac to step up.
Was he on the Biomarin trial?
He was, yeah. So he was cut adrift too, So he would have been eligible for this generous offer from Genzyme, but unfortunately he didn't make it.
And what's in it for the drug company as far as you're aware? Are you part of a trial? Is this, I mean, obviously they'll be studying the efficacy, and if it's really outstanding, they'll want to publish that and inform people, but is that it? That's the quid pro quo, is it?
Yes, well, this isn't a trial now. This is the medication that's been around for over 10 years that 76 other countries get, I must add. And out of all the OECD countries, there's only Austria, Iceland and New Zealand who don't give it to their citizens. So really, no, we don't have to meet any criteria or be able to show that we can run a marathon at the every 6 months to be able to stay on it. They're just giving it compassionately, without the strings.
When do you start taking it? When's your first dose?
It should be next month, and it should be within the next few weeks.
5 minutes from home.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? You should come down. We'll have a party.
Alison Locke, what extraordinary news completely out of the blue. Speaking of completely out of the blue, they announced the best film was La La Land. Warren Beatty read out La La Land. The La La Land crew went up onto the stage. It wasn't. It was Moonlight. Unbelievable scenes at the Oscars. Lots of feedback tonight. Thank you. The show's been really crowded, but we'll bring you some of it tomorrow. Until then, have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister says he hears from employers 2 or 3 times a week they're struggling to find enough New Zealanders to fill vacancies, often because they'd failed the drug test. More than $4 million spent on sending New Zealand officials around the world to negotiate the failed TPP. Lionel Patia gets life for the Gold Coast murder of his ex-partner New Zealander Tara Brown. Red faces at this year's Oscars after La La Land was mistakenly announced as Best Picture. It was, in fact, Moonlight. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather at 7.
Hangover, sunburn, the drone of flies, perpetual dad jokes. Is it the endless cricket commentary that makes the gin bottle dangerously appealing?
That could go all the way.
And it's not even lunchtime yet.
Fear not.